Welcome to GremoryLand, a new theme park full of fun thrills and amazing attractions. 6 high school friends reunite as they're invited to be the premier guests. Things quickly go off the deep end, however, when they find that the attractions are horrifying and seemingly deadly. They have no choice but to enter the different areas of the park or be chased around by murderous mascots. As they make their way through the unsettling attractions, they start to find clues on how to escape, and they're all tied to the friends' twisted pasts. Is this just an elaborate prank with cutting-edge effects and over-the-top scares, or is something sinister going on behind the scenes? Either way, it's a frightening journey with some truly disturbing moments and shocking twists. Grab yourself a ticket. Welcome to GremoryLand. Hello friends, this is Grief speaking. I asked you again what comics you wanted me to cover on the channel, and I got a few people asking me to please cover more webcomics because they don't really get the in-depth coverage that I typically give on my channel. So today we're looking at another webtoon comic called GremoryLand. I've really enjoyed reading this one. It's got some of the conspiracy elements of Everything is Fine and the YA drama of Stagtown, but it also feels completely different than the other webcomics I've covered. Of course, it's chock full of horror as well. GremoryLand does a particularly good job of setting up disturbing scenarios. It's not a massive series, but it's still big enough that I've decided to divvy it up into 2 videos. So this week we'll cover the first half of the series, and next week we'll wrap it up with the series finale. But let's not waste any more time and get into it. This is GremoryLand Explained. The story kicks off with a creepy-ass character named Gremory welcoming 6 friends to a new theme park, the aptly named GremoryLand. He says that their worst nightmares are born in this place, and it's too late to back out now. This message is shown to the friends in the back of a limo as they head to GremoryLand. So let's do a quick roll call here. We've got Bruno, Margot, Zoe, Rami, Jax, and Becca. We jump ahead and learn that the gang has been waiting inside the limo without moving for a half an hour, and there's no signal. Sick of waiting for someone to formally let them out, Margot just opens the door, and they find themselves outside of the freaky entrance. Becca takes a picture but is a little confused. The only reason they are here in the first place is because she's an influencer, but without any signal, how's she supposed to promote it live? As they enter the park, they're greeted with a creepy Gremory fountain, and they decide to try the first attraction they see, which is labeled Happy Family. They enter to find a bizarre setup for a ride. An animatronic husband, wife, and son are standing in what looks like a living room, and a narration plays introducing them to the Thompsons, the happiest family in America. There's several oversized baby carriages on a track used as carts for the ride, so the crew climb in to a cart and roll into the next room. We learn more about this idyllic family. The father, James, worked at a prestigious company, and his beautiful wife dedicated her heart and soul to the family's well-being. Zoe takes issue with the fact that the husband gets a name and a job, and she's just the wife, only valued for her beauty and servitude. Jax immediately rolls his eyes and tells her to shut up about it. In the next room, we see that the wife is pregnant, and the family's excited as they anticipate the arrival of a beautiful baby girl. At this point, everyone's wondering if this is even supposed to be scary, but up ahead, the track splits, and the 3 carts separate into different rooms. Jax and Becca roll into a bit of a darker turn for the Thompsons. Apparently, James lost his job, which has led him to heavy drinking. We then cut to Rami and Zoe. In their room, they see something even worse. James eventually began taking out his problems on his wife and would brutally beat her. Yep, things have drastically escalated, and we can see the bruised cheek of the wife as James hits her with a belt. Zoe's disturbed by the sight of it, and it seems to relate closely to her own past. The narration continues, and we learn that during one of the beatings, the wife lost her baby. And there's a pretty disturbing panel showing the bottom of the puppet's dress covered in blood. My god. Bruno and Margot then see the next scenario. The little boy had been very excited for the baby, and after it died, he began to take care of a doll as if it were his sister. Pretty sad and creepy. One day, the family heard cries of a baby coming from behind the walls of the house. The boy believed that by playing with the doll so much, he had somehow managed to contact his dead sister. He tells this to everyone, including his friend Margot. The fact that the character in the story has the same name freaks Margot out, and she demands they leave the ride. She struggles to undo the lap bar. We see Jax and Becca approach the next scenario. We learn that the cries did not appear because of the boy. It was actually the mother, and we see a pretty messed up scene scene of the mother standing over a bloody broken doll in some kind of ritual. It seems like she started sacrificing other infants in an attempt to bring hers back. Finally, Margot manages to get the bar up and jumps out of the carriage. They walk down the track a bit until they find an exit door. However, when they enter, they seem to be back in the living room and the others all show up to the same place. The entrance is now boarded up and they begin to hear singing coming from upstairs. A song with some unsettling lyrics ring out. "My dear sweet girl, I felt you growing inside of me. I lost you and I thought I was going crazy." The gang then makes their way upstairs and follow the song to a room. Inside, Mrs. Thompson is standing over the bed and continues the song. "But thanks to love, I've been able to bring you back." The gang approaches the bed and this is a really messed up scene. The father, James, is laying on the bed with his stomach swelled up like a pregnant woman. There's some weird details here that imply this is not a puppet but real human flesh. Either that or Gremory really went all out with the effects. The wife then finishes up the song. "Through your executor, you will be reborn." She pulls up a knife and then slashes into James' belly, tearing it open and shooting blood out onto Becca's face. The wife turns to look at her and says, "And you will become my baby's food." She pulls up the knife and runs at them, screaming, "Feed my baby." I don't know what I was expecting from this comic, but it wasn't this shit. I mean, what the hell? The friends all run back downstairs and find all the doors are locked except one, which leads to the basement. Downstairs, they find the weird symbols used in the mother's bizarre ritual. Suddenly, the walls burst into flames and everyone freaks out when they see the most terrifying thing so far. A giant cursed baby chained to the ceiling and its umbilical cord like a snake with sharp teeth. It is a really creepy sight that I won't be forgetting anytime soon. They manage to dodge the umbilical cord and climb out of a nearby window to safety. For a moment, they all just stand there outside of the house, wondering what the hell just happened. Margot calls out Becca for dragging them here to this twisted park, but Jax defends her, saying, "Come on, it was fun." Zoe points out the fact that Becca has actual blood on her face, and they almost burned alive down there. Margot declares she's leaving, and Jax tries to convince her to turn back, saying it was just dolls and some really good effects. They make it back to the entrance and find the limo is gone, but Margot doesn't let this deter her, and she starts walking into the dead of night. The thing is, eventually she hits a thick wall of concrete. They realize they're not outside at all, and never were. Suddenly, Gregory's disembodied voice speaks to them, telling them that there is only one exit out of the park, and the only way to access it is to locate the different clues scattered around the attractions. He ends this with an ominous "Welcome to GremoryLand." Everyone is a little freaked out, but Becca is still holding on hope that this is all part of the experience. Margot points out the burn on her shirt and thinks Becca is not taking this seriously. But either way, they're stuck in here and need to continue through the park. Back inside, they look for a staff member to let them out, but it's pretty much a ghost town. Finally, they see a gift shop and figure there should be some employees inside. As you might expect, the place is deserted, and Margot once again starts berating Becca for getting them into this mess. As they argue, Rami wanders off toward the back of the store. He's a little freaked out when he sees a shelf of Gremory dolls and a weird panda head sitting on top. It seems to have blood speckled on its cheeks, and he moves in for a closer look when suddenly it opens its mouth in a big smile. This jump scares Rami and he falls to the floor yelling. What he was actually seeing was someone in a panda suit standing outside the window behind the shelf. They all hurry outside to figure out what's going on and are confronted with 3 mascots: a bunny, a goat, and of course the panda. They're just standing there staring. It's pretty creepy. Jax demands they tell him how to get out of the park, but the figures stay silent. On a close look, we can see they're all splattered with blood. Then they all pull weapons out from behind their backs. The bunny has a spiked bat, the panda has a chainsaw, and the goat has 2 sets of huge bloody shears. They start chasing the friends, who run in a panic into a nearby building, slamming the door behind them. They pause for a moment, wondering if this is still part of the entertainment or if the mascots would have actually hurt them. Bruno managed to grab a section of a map from the gift shop, and they figured they must have entered what's labeled the Museum of the Sleepers, whatever that means. In the next room, they see an older gentleman watching static on a TV and a sign that says "Silence, please." When they enter, they discover the man is simply another doll, although he's very realistic. As they admire him, Gremory suddenly pops onto the TV. He introduces them to the Museum of the Sleepers and tells them this is a place of contemplation, so it's very important not to disturb their sleep. He says the doll's name is Jeff. Jeff ensures that the rules are met and thus maintains absolute silence during their tour. Gremory leaves the screen while telling them to enjoy their visits, and then the words 16 sleepers flashes on the screen. Well, they don't have much choice, so the crew looks ahead to an eerily dark hallway. On the floor, we can see a rail, presumably for Jeff to travel along along if needed. They hear Jax call out from behind, telling them to check out Jeff's new look. This doofus swapped hats with the doll as a goof, and the rest of them just tell him to knock it off. There's always one guy like this in every horror movie. In the middle of the hallway, they pass by a strange exhibit of a colorfully dressed woman with her eyes closed holding a book. The art here is really creepy. It's hard to explain. It both looks like a comic drawing and also kind of like a photo at the same time. Anyway, that a-hole Jax decides to yell at the woman to wake up, and as soon as he does, her eyes spring open. Becca asks Jax what the hell he's doing, and he justifies it by pointing out how happy the woman looks. At the same time, however, wheels can be heard moving in on them fast, and we see Jeff rushing toward them on the rail. He slams into Jax, knocking him to the ground. The doll then raises a finger to his lips and shushes him. Okay, that's pretty creepy, and I'm less and less sure that Jeff is actually a puppet. Anyway, Jax acts like he could have kicked Jeff's ass if he wanted to, and they move along to the next exhibit. Now the hallway is filled with several vases atop a series of pedestals. This forces them to carefully squeeze past to get through. In the wall is another doll surrounded by rose bushes and holding a violin. They're successful for the most part, getting to the other side without bumping the vases, until Bruno's chain wallet snags on one of the pedestals, pulling it over and breaking the vase. God damn it, a chain wallet, really? Anyway, as soon as it shatters, the puppet's eyes pop open and they begin to play the violin. In a terrifying flash, Jeff wheels toward them, this time with a nightstick, and takes a swing at Margot. Jax has had enough and squares up on Jeff, ready to fight back, but Jeff don't play that shit, and he smacks Jax across the jaw before once again shushing him. After this, they decide it's best to just keep moving. They come upon a sign that says Old Milltown, and they walk out into a much more open area that resembles a creepy old town, like something from A Nightmare Before Christmas. They're all really on guard now, trying to keep quiet in case Jeff comes to kick their ass again. However, right in front of Margot, a giant spider drops down by its web. She can't help but let out a terrified scream. One of the old mill houses lights up, a crow caws, and wheels can be heard rapidly approaching on the track. Jeff comes barreling at them, this time holding a freaking taser. Luckily, they all jump out of the way, and Jeff just shushes them once again. As he wheels away, Jax is sick of it and runs up, kicking Jeff in the back. Immediately, the taser swaps out of his hand for a gun. He turns around with glowing red eyes and points the gun at Jax. Man, who would have thought the scariest thing in this comic so far would be an old dude named Jeff? Don't fuck with Jeff, that's all I gotta say. He fires a gun which whizzes right by Jax and Becca and blows a hole in one of the houses. They look at the puppet in terror as he once again shushes them. They continue on to the next area. It's another hallway, but this one is extremely long and narrow, so if Jeff attacks again, there's no chance of getting out of the way. They finally reach the end and find it blocked by an iron gate. On the other side is a series of mannequins dancing, and one is holding the key to the gate. On the floor below the mannequin, it's clear that there is a rail path leading to the gate, meaning that if they woke up the mannequins, it would likely unlock the gate. But doing so is also going to alert Jeff. It's their only chance, so on 3, Zoe screams at the mannequin to wake up. Its eyes open and it slowly moves towards the door while the other figures dance around the room. At the same time, Jeff comes wheeling toward them faster than ever, his eyes glowing red again. It's honestly a horrifying image. The key turns, the gate opens, and everyone bolts to the other side of the room where the exit door is, dodging the dancing mannequins along the way. Becca is furthest behind and gets slammed by one of the dancers, knocking her glasses to the ground. She picks them up and comes running, but this slows her down significantly. Just as she reaches the others, a gunshot sounds and a bullet tears right through Becca's skull. Zoe has no choice but to shut the exit door, and as Becca's body collapses, we can see Jeff one last time with his smoking pistol and glowing red eyes. It then cuts to the TV from the start of the attraction, and we see the number increase from 16 sleepers to 17. That's a pretty eerie way to end this section. Outside, the gang of friends break down crying over what happened, other than Jax of course, because he's so tough, you know. Rami walks up to Zoe, who's got her head in her arms, and this triggers a flashback to a similar situation back in high school, where Zoe sat at the same position but for a completely different reason. There's some quick flashing images suggesting that Zoe had suffered physical abuse from her father. Rami tries to comfort her and she smacks his hand away, saying not to touch her, and how all men believe they have the right to do whatever they want with women. She takes it further by accusing them of all being being violent by nature and then runs away. The next day, when class ends, Rami offers to walk home with Zoe, but she ignores him and asks Becca to walk home instead. Later, while Becca and Zoe are walking, they encounter Rami being bullied by some classmates. Zoe immediately interferes and chews them out for picking on him. We learn the reason they're bullying him is because he's gay, and they accuse him of checking them out in class. Along with the two bullies is Jax. He's not engaging in it himself, but is still complacent as his friends harass Rami. Later, Zoe apologizes for giving Rami the cold shoulder. Things are bad at home and she just took it out on him. Back in the present, while his friends cry, Jax says it's not their fault and they just need to move on or they'll never escape. Zoe snaps at him, telling him to let them have a minute for God's sake. She questions why Jax doesn't seem to care at all about what happened to Becca, and he coldly accuses her of leaving Becca behind. This turns into a heated back and forth where they basically accuse each other of getting their friend killed. Meanwhile, Rami seems to be stressing out. He finally snaps at Jax, telling him to shut up and calling him an insensitive asshole, saying that he should be dead instead of Becca. Pretty harsh, though it turns out that this was just a fantasy in Rami's head. In reality, he calms himself down. He does so by imagining he's talking to an angel who guides him and keeps him rational. He does put a stop to the argument, but in a much more diplomatic way, and so the crew moves along. Next, they encounter an old cinema. In place of a ticket booth is a strange series of symbols and the instructions to choose a seat. Weird. There's a vending machine nearby, and Bruno grabs himself a drink. As he takes a swig, he sees something out of the corner of his eye. The Killer Mascots making their way toward them. With no way into the cinema, they bolt for the next attraction, a small church surrounded by a cemetery. They run inside and the iron gates lock behind them. First, they try to get into the church, but it's locked, and as they make their way around, they find themselves in a massive maze. After a seemingly endless series of turns, it's clear that they're lost and might not ever find a way out. Bruno hears a strange noise and turns to see the silhouette of a little girl. He seems to recognize her, addressing the figure as Mia, and takes off after the shadow. Then we get a little bit of Bruno's backstory. In the past, we see a photo of Bruno and his little sister Mia, clearly a happy pair of siblings. Bruno sits lazily on his bed texting Margot, who says that she's going to be in the library all day studying. Bruno's mother comes in and asks if he's spoken to his sister since her piano lessons finished up hours ago and she's not answering her phone. The ever-annoyed teenager, Bruno says he doesn't know and that she's probably fine. In reality, she's far from fine. In fact, she's dead and her corpse is laying alone on a dirt trail. Back in the present, Bruno continues to chase after Mia's silhouette until he finds a mausoleum with his own name on it. It's about this time when the others realize that Bruno is missing. They search for him and end up finding the mausoleum, along with others that have their names on them. Zoe enters hers looking for any clues when the floor drops out from under her and she falls into the darkness below. In what appears to be another flashback, Bruno plays hide and seek with Mia in a field. However, he actually finds her body contorted on the ground, and her lungs are completely outside of her body protruding from her mouth. It's bizarre and terrifying. There's a flash of an inhaler spraying into thin air and Mia choking. Then Bruno wakes up. This was nothing but a nightmare. Apparently, Bruno fell through the floor as well and was knocked out from the fall. He finds himself in a sort of dungeon and can hear Mia calling to him from the darkness up ahead. She says that she's been waiting for him and now they can be together forever. He turns a corner and sees something absolutely frightening. A creature comes running out from the dark, and it's nightmare fuel to say the least. It looks like a set of human lungs on a metallic skeleton missing its arms, and it has knives for legs. The creepiest part, however, is its face. Remember in the museum how I said that the art looked almost like a real photo mixed with the drawing? Well, this is a much more disturbing version of that. Bruno runs like hell until he hits a dead end back where he started. He finds a different path until he ends up in a chamber with multiple entryways. Out of one of the doors, two more of the creatures appear and run at him. Back up top, the other three try and figure out what happened to Zoe, and when Rami enters her mausoleum, nothing happens. He realizes that maybe they need to enter their own, and sure enough, when he walks inside of the one with his name, he falls through the floor, spraining his ankle in the process. He limps along through the dark corridor and sees skulls on the walls as he passes. Up ahead, he sees a shadow, but instead of one of the creatures, it turns out to be Jax. In some ways, that might be worse. They scare the hell out of each other and then continue onward. The only path forward, however, seems to have corpses lining the walls. Rami's too scared to go through, and Jax bullies him, calling him a little girl. He eventually softens though and takes Rami's hand, leading him through. As they emerge on the other side, they hear Bruno shout and run up ahead to see what happened. They enter the chamber Bruno is standing in, and it shifts to Bruno's perspective. He sees Jax and Rami as the two creatures rushing toward him. He screams at them not to come near, and I get why. These things are freaky as hell from his point of view. It then cuts to another flashback. We learn that Margot and Bruno were really close before his sister passed away, and she was almost like part of the family. After Mia's death, Bruno became fairly closed off and had a hard time moving on. She even finds him trying to contact Mia with a Ouija board. Pretty sad. In the present, Bruno comes back to his senses, and the gang thinks that there must have been something in the drink he got from the vending machine which caused him to hallucinate. Either way, he says that there's something really wrong with this park. It's like the attractions are related to them somehow. Not to mention their names engraved in the mausoleums. Nearby in the chamber, Zoe finds a red journal. Inside, the author mentions painting arrows to find their way back out, but warns of a monster hidden beneath the church. Every night at midnight, the priest claims to hear strange noises under the floor. Just then, the church bell rings, striking midnight. Everyone's eyes widen, and nearby they hear a sound coming from one of the entryways, which is laced with human skulls. Zoe looks in and sees a bloody trail, and then from the end of the tunnel emerges a massive worm-like creature with sharp teeth wriggling toward them. They run in the opposite direction and spot one of the red arrows. According to the journal, this will lead to the exit. Unfortunately, Rami's ankle is messed up and he's moving slow, but Jax helps him walk, and they finally make it to the way out. Only problem is, it's blocked by rubble. In the distance, they can hear the giant worm still chasing them. There's actually kind of an interesting shot here where we can see that it has wheels on the bottom, just like Jeff. Okay, so I guess Gremory is really good at making cool ass effects. They all work together to start clearing the rubble and make it out before it gets to them. They spot the nearest street lamp and make it back to one of the park's paths. Oddly enough, it starts raining, which means they're still outside despite the large walls closing them in. The good news is, once it's dawn, they'll be able to see much easier and get the hell out of here. Up ahead, they see a burger restaurant. Everyone heads inside, and Jax takes Rami into the outside bathroom to help him with his ankle. He looks for a first aid kit, and Rami tells him he's thankful for the help and that things seem better between them. Jax starts to wrap Rami's ankle, and we get another backstory segment. Turns out that Jax and Rami were really good friends when they were younger. Although after an encounter where Jax kisses him on the cheek, Jax's father tells him not to do that. It's not normal. Later, we see the two boys playing with dolls at the park when some other boys show up and call them homos and say they're acting like girls or they'd come play football with them. Jax gets defensive and ditches Rami to go play ball. We then get a montage of Jax aging up while quotes from his homophobic father litter the panels. It's all pretty stereotypical stuff, like how men have to act tough. There's a weird line where he says a real man has a big, but it cuts off before we see the obvious ending. It then cuts to Jax as an adult about to get it on with a girl, but when she grabs the crotch of his pants, he gets hesitant about the whole thing. The girl is pretty annoyed with the tease and suggests that maybe he has a pretty small one. In a comically shocking moment, his crotch gets its own speech bubble saying, "Don't let a girl talk to you like that, Jax. She's just a." He then chokes the girl, calling her a bitch. Wow, just in case Jax wasn't already your most hated character. It then cuts back to the present where Jax and Rami are kissing. So I guess that's why the guy acts so macho. He's overcompensating in a couple of different ways. But seriously, what was with his crotch talking to him? That was a little goofy for an otherwise serious comic. Inside the burger joint, the others try and come up with a plan. Margot thinks they should tour the entire park and try to find another exit, but the others believe they ultimately are gonna have to visit each attraction before Gremory will let them leave. Plus, those mascots are still out there, and wandering the streets isn't the best idea. Bruno flips through the journal they found, and in one of the pages discovers a symbol that he swears he saw on the cinema ticket machine. Thinking back on it, there was one symbol with a fetus, which may be related to the first attraction, and Margot noticed at the museum that Jeff had a badge with a moon symbol. Maybe they could try selecting these symbols and finally find an exit. It's worth a shot, and they head back to the cinema. Sure enough, they select the symbols and the doors swing open. Everyone heads in but Margot, who refuses to enter, saying they'll end up dead if they keep going on like this. Bruno asks her to please come with them, and she follows along. They enter one of the theaters, and suddenly the projector starts up, playing a video of Gremory welcoming them and introducing a horror film starring our dear friends. Suddenly, a title card pops up on the screen that says 3 mascots from hell and shows the creepy eyes of the killer mascots. Zoe investigates the screen and finds that there's some space behind it. She thinks that they'll have to enter the movie, so to speak. Margot freaks out again and tries to leave, but finds the doors are locked. Zoe and the others try to tell her there's no other choice, they just have to move forward, and Margot just sits down in one of the seats, telling them to just go by themselves. If they do find a clue, then they can come back and get her. What a brat. Bruno says they can't force her and offers to stay with her so she's not left alone. Zoe warns them not to split the party, but Margot insists, and so Bruno and her stay behind while Zoe, Jax, and Rami climb behind the screen. They move through some curtains to find a forest basked in a red glow. Rami tries to talk to Jax about what happened, but he just says it was a mistake and calls it disgusting. Obviously, Rami's pretty upset, but once again he gets guidance from his imaginary angel who reminds him not to take it personally. It's not his fault that Jax is living in denial. They eventually come upon an old barn, but it's locked, so they enter a nearby country house to look for a key. As they creep through the doorway, they look over and see the goat mascot sitting in an armchair and watching static on a TV. Back in the cinema, Margot and Bruno have a moment to talk. Margot comments about how different everyone is from when they were in high school, especially Zoe, who now she can't even stand. She says that her and Bruno have always had a special bond though, right? He just says, yeah, you've always been a good family friend, obviously not getting the hint, and you can see her smile fade. Once the others spot the mascot, they try and stay quiet and sneak into the other section of the house. They make it to the kitchen, which has blood smeared across almost every surface and a pot full of what looks like entrails. Jax checks one of the cupboards and a plate falls out, shattering on the ground. In the next room, we can see the goat stand up holding the large shears, and he knows they're here. They split up to different hiding spots. Zoe hides in the pantry where she finds the barn key, and as the goat enters the kitchen, Jax and Rami sneak around the counters and into the other room. Unfortunately, the goat moves right toward the pantry and stops in front of it. But before he does anything to Zoe, Jax shouts at the mascot to distract him, and the chase is on as the goat follows them through the house. When they get back to the front door, they find, as usual, that it's now locked. Rami narrowly avoids getting stabbed by the shears, and they head up the stairs instead. The goat is right behind him though, and once again slashes at him with the large shears. Before they make contact, Zoe jumps on the mascot's back and tries to choke him. She tells Rami to run. The goat knocks her off down the stairs and continues his pursuit of the guys. There's only one door upstairs and it's barred by a 2x4. They pull it off and look inside to see something pretty messed up. 2 bodies are hanging from the ceiling with their skin flayed off. The mascot bursts in behind them and pins Jax to a table in the room. As he struggles to fight the killer off, Rami just stands there shaking in fear without helping. In a tense struggle, Jax sees a crowbar on the table but can't quite reach it. He's almost done for when he spots the goat's other pair of shears in its pocket. He slides them out and stabs the goat in the neck, killing him. Out of curiosity, Jax pulls off its mask to reveal a pretty disturbed looking bald man underneath, now with a massive hole in his neck of course. He looks malnourished and part of his ear is missing. I wonder who this guy was and how he ended up working for Gremory. Jax turns to Rami and lays into him for not helping, calling him a sissy. Rami tries to stay calm and looks towards the angel, talking him down, but Jax's words obscure her and he calls Rami a dwarf. Rami then sharply replies that unlike Jax, he's not ashamed of his size. This of course leaves Jax silent for a moment. Then his crotch talks to him again, saying not to let Rami talk to him like this and to show him who the real man is here. Jax goes into a full rage and starts choking Rami, telling him again that he disgusts him. In another flashback, this time in middle school, we see where Rami first developed the idea of the angel based on a children's show that he liked. In class, we see some kids bully him and call him a girl. These are clearly Jax's friends and he just stands there letting them do it. Finally, Rami can't take it anymore and snaps, stabbing one of the bullies in the hand with his pen. Man, Rami really has some suppressed rage built up in him, huh? After this incident, Rami's parents put him in therapy, and as an exercise, he starts writing stories as a way of venting his anger. He even wins an award for one. In the present, Jax stops choking him, and suddenly he's hit with years of pent-up frustration from the abuse he's suffered. He picks up the crowbar and bashes Jax in the head with it, leaving a bloody gash. Jax calls him a coward, saying he doesn't have the guts to fight like a man. Rami looks at him with wide eyes and says, "This is not cowardly. This is evolution." He raises the crowbar and then proceeds to smash the living hell out of Jax. Blood sprays and we get a glimpse of Jax and Rami as children, with blood splattering onto the memories. As he delivers the final devastating blow, we can see the angel that guides him burning up in flames. Zoe catches up to the room to see the gruesome sight, the dead mascot and Jax murdered by Rami. He looks up at Zoe and she's shocked, saying, "What have you done?" He starts to defend himself, saying he was tired of it, the insults, the abuse, and being despised by society. Zoe of all people should understand the pain that these kind of people cause. They're an obstruction to the improvement of the world. Zoe looks over at Jax's bloody head and says that Rami's lost his mind, and that at the end of the day, he's worse than the very people he's talking about. She slams the door shut and bars it again, locking Rami inside with the 3 corpses. Back at the cinema, Zoe stands outside the curtains in the woods, reflecting on what she just witnessed. She finds Margot and Bruno still sitting inside, and not knowing how to explain the truth, she lies, saying that Jax and Rami fell into an underground corridor like in the cemetery, and it closed before she could save them. Zoe says they'll probably catch up with them later and leads them to the barn, which she uses the key to open. They walk into a drastically different setting. It feels like a fun house with bright neon colors on every surface. The floor is one big black and purple spiral. Makes me dizzy just looking at it. They cross the room toward the exit door, but of course it won't open. Hanging at the center of the room is another key, but before they can jump and grab it, the bunny mascot appears on a tricycle hanging from the ceiling. He says, "Let's go for a spin," and shifts a lever, causing the room to spin. They struggle to stand, and Zoe goes to grab the key when the bunny shifts the lever in the opposite direction, causing the spin to reverse and speed up. It gets so intense that they can't even move. Bruno gets really close to grabbing the key, but before he can, he pukes everywhere and passes out. Margot thinks fast and pulls a picture frame from the wall. She throws it at the key, knocking it to the ground by Zoe. Zoe grabs it and slowly crawls to the door. The intensity here is crazy as she painstakingly gets the door open and the room stops spinning. It's one of those moments where I physically felt relieved that the scenario was over. They enter the next room and the door locks behind them. It seems they're in a sort of cage with 3 huge buttons on the ground, and on the other side of the bars is the panda mascot along with a big screen. He says it's time to test their friendship with the truth game. They must answer a series of questions by stepping on the number button corresponding with the right answer. The longer they take to answer the question, the faster the ceiling will drop on them. Bruno looks up and sees massive spikes above them, and if they get an answer wrong, the ceiling will drop significantly. The panda wastes no time before jumping into the first question: who is the youngest in the group? On the screen, we see 3 options: Rami, Jax, and Becca. The ceiling starts lowering and the 3 quickly try and remember everyone's birthdays, and after doing the math, they finally decide Becca's the youngest and hit the 3rd button. This is correct and the spike ceiling stops. The next question is, what is Margot's favorite color? That's an easy one, she immediately steps on pink. Next, the panda asks, what is Chandler's job? They're all pretty confused. Who the hell's Chandler? Well, if you're a Friends fan, you know this is a reference to Chandler Bing and the show's ongoing joke of no one knowing what his actual job is. Well, I guess these 3 never watched the show and picked the wrong answer by randomly guessing. So the ceiling drops quite a bit, now hovering just over their heads. By the way, the correct answer was data analyst. Anyway, the next question is, who locked their best friend in a farmhouse room? Of course, every answer is the same: Zoe. She stomps on one of the buttons and tells them she'll explain later. Margot isn't having it and confronts her, realizing Zoe lied to them, and asks what really happened. The panda then asks the final question: where were you not on March 27th, 2010 at 5:30 p.m.? Bruno instantly recognizes the date as the day his sister died. The 3 options are in the library, at home, and with Mia. It's kind of a messed up question, but obviously none of them were with Mia when she died. Bruno feels a ton of guilt all of a sudden though, wishing he had been there to pick her up from her piano lessons. Zoe steps on the 3rd option, but the screen says this was incorrect. The ceiling then drops so low they're forced to practically lay down to avoid being stabbed. The panda says since this was the last question, he'll give them one more chance. They can't figure out why this would be incorrect, thinking maybe it's a trick question or something. They panic as the spikes get inches from their faces. Then Margot suddenly presses one of the buttons. She picked the option labeled with Mia, and that answer is correct. So the spikes retreat to the ceiling. Bruno comes to the realization that Margot must have been with Mia when she died. She admits that she wasn't at the library and was in fact with Mia. She explains what happened, and we see this in the form of a flashback. Margot decided to pick up Mia from her piano lesson so they could talk about an issue between them. They went for a walk on the mountain trail by Mia's academy. Margot felt like Mia had distanced herself from her and notes that she was barely speaking to her. She says that Mia then told her how she couldn't stand her and she was tired of seeing her at their house constantly. Mainly, Mia hated how she was hogging Bruno, and she calls Margot a parasite on the family. Margot ran away, and the next day she heard the news that Mia's body was found. She felt so guilty that she just couldn't bring herself to tell Bruno. In the present, the panda gives them a reward for winning the truth game. The final clue is displayed on the screen in the form of an arrow pointing to an area on the map. The door opens up, and as they exit into the rain, a dramatic dialogue ensues between Bruno and Margot. Obviously, Bruno feels betrayed and says he can't even look at Margot anymore. They move on in silence to the next clue and find the entrance to a roller coaster. They figure they'll have to ride it, and they get into the carts, the front of which is splattered with blood. Zoe is really nervous about this, saying she has a fear of heights. Once they're locked in, Gremory appears on the screen. He congratulates them on making it this far and says that the coaster will lead them to the park exit. The coaster suddenly launches forward and the ride begins. They go up to a steep slope at the top of the tracks, and as they near the top, they can see a ceiling. Yeah, so it's not just walls closing them in, the whole park is completely sealed up top to bottom, and there's hundreds of sprinklers on the ceiling, which are what's causing the rain. They go up over the top, and right before the gravity sinks in, the chest bars on the carts unlatch. Man, that is a frightening thought. Well, fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, the cart locks up, leaving them stuck at the top of the tracks. Zoe is freaking the hell out, and I don't blame her. Bruno tries to calm her down and spots what looks like a set of stairs at the bottom of the tracks, a possible exit. Out of options once again, they're forced to start climbing downward. Bruno and Margot make it down to the flat part of the track quickly, but Zoe, afraid of heights, is taking her time. Taking advantage of the moment alone, Margot tries again to apologize to Bruno for not telling him about what happened with her and Mia. He just tells her to leave him alone again, and she asks why he's doing this to her. It's not her fault Mia had that asthma attack, and it's not her fault the inhaler was empty. Bruno glances back at her and asks, "How did you know the inhaler was empty?" It jumps to another flashback. Margot talks about how she became infatuated with Bruno from the moment she met him and wanted to be a part of his life. She loved his family too and quickly became like another daughter to them. The only problem was his little sister Mia. Bruno and Mia were close, and Margot saw her as an obstacle. We see Margot pick up Mia from her piano lessons, but this time we see the truth. Margot is the one who has an issue and tells Mia she's been preventing her from spending more time with Bruno. Mia explains that she's not trying to push Margot away, she just wants to spend time with her brother as well. But Margot goes all psycho, telling the girl not to play dumb. Clearly this is a concerted effort against her. Mia does admit that sometimes she wants to spend time with her family, and just her family, without Margot being involved. She didn't say anything because she didn't want to hurt Margot's feelings. The argument gets heated, and eventually Mia does call her a parasite on the family, but now these words seem way more justified considering Margot's crazy behavior, especially since Mia is obviously way younger. In the middle of the conversation, Mia begins violently coughing and needs her inhaler. Margot pulls it out for her but hesitates. Mia falls to her knees in a fit and begs Margot for it, but in a seriously shocking moment, Margot intentionally wastes the inhaler, spraying it into the air. Mia collapses to the ground, her bloodshot eyes wide in fear, and she finally dies. Wow, so it was so much worse than we thought. Margot runs away and starts texting Bruno, giving him the made-up library alibi. Back in the present, Bruno pieces together what happened. If Margot knew about the inhaler, she must have been the one to empty it. He believes the reason Margot wanted to try and leave the park so early on was because she was afraid Gremory would reveal the truth. Margot runs up and hugs Bruno, pathetically begging for his love and forgiveness. Bruno tries his best to push her away from him. She says that if he forgives her, she'll tell him who's behind all of this. She thinks she knows who Gremory is. Zoe finally makes it down and sees there's a struggle up ahead. Margot's gone full psycho, and it's pretty dangerous. A wrong move here could send them both falling off the tracks. Zoe catches up to them and pulls Margot off, asking her what her problem is. She just tells Zoe to watch her foot or she could fall. This forces Zoe to look down, which triggers her acrophobia. Margot takes the opportunity to verbally attack Zoe for always thinking she's so perfect and preaching to everyone. She says that Zoe isn't better than her and never will be. She then raises a foot, ready to kick Zoe off the tracks, but at the last second, Bruno moves in and pushes Margot off, who goes falling to her death below. It then cuts to another flashback. It seems to be a graduation party as the 6 friends sit around having a drink and celebrating never having to go back to high school. Becca tells Zoe she better keep in touch, and we get a quick flash of her in the museum with a bullet through her head. We see Jax and Rami smiling at each other, and then quick glimpses of Rami killing Jax in a bloody mess. Margot says that Bruno probably won't come after the death of his sister, and we get another flash of her falling to her death. So wait, if Bruno's not here, then who's the 6th friend? It's a girl named Eva, who I guess they're all very close to. Her name and face is familiar, as she's already been mentioned in passing a couple times, and we can even see her talking to Rami in one of the flashbacks. They all toast each other, and it finally cuts back to the present. Zoe's trying to comfort Bruno, saying that he had to do what he did to save her life. They stand up and start to move when suddenly the coaster springs to life behind them and starts heading their way fast. Bruno grabs Zoe's hand and they run as fast as they can towards the stairs, barely making it and avoiding the carts. In a moment of relief, they hold each other and share a glance. Make of that what you will. They make their way down the stairs and into a wooded area. Here they find a lit path and begin to follow it. They see a red X marked on one of the trees, and up ahead, finally, an exit to the park. But someone steps onto the path in front of them. The panda mascot appears, sporting his signature chainsaw. He dashes at them swinging it, and they run in opposite directions. Zoe thinks she got away, but from nearby, a hand reaches out and grabs her, though we don't know whose. Bruno, on the other hand, is out of the frying pan and into the fire as he runs straight into the bunny mascot, who starts swinging at him with its spiked bat. He ends up back on the lighted path and sees the exit again. With both mascots now hot on his tail, he runs into the glowing park exit, though his face shows pure shock at what he sees on the other side. We don't get to see what it is, and instead it cuts to a totally different area and character. An older woman is standing at the edge of some woods in the middle of the wilderness. She speaks to someone on the phone saying she'll handle this case. The person on the other line implies that she's only doing this for her daughter, and she says she'll do it for her sake. A group of friends doesn't just vanish without a trace like this. She hangs up and we get an inner monologue where we find out that this is Eva's mother, and she wants to know who Gremory is and who killed her daughter. This immediately opens the door to a lot of questions, but this is the season 1 finale, and where I'm gonna end the video for now. What do you guys think is going on here? What did Bruno find behind that exit? Who grabbed Zoe in the woods? What happened to Eva? And for God's sakes, who is Gremory? Don't worry, next week I'll be covering seasons 2 and 3 and wrapping up the whole series, so we'll finally get some answers. Shout out to Kill Me Katie, as always, for the intro and outro music, which is likely playing right now. And if you want to see your art at the end of my videos, email me a submission to the address below with a name or social media handle. But I appreciate you guys watching at all. This is Grief speaking. Goodbye, friends.